felony conviction, he can no longer vote. Now, before we had the poll tax, we had questions like how many bubbles are in a bar of soap. Now it's the felony conviction that precludes a black man's voting rights.
How many bubbles was in the soap? I saw that on TV the other night.
Who knows? That was one way to keep you out of voting. Now it's the felony conviction. We have 1 in every 5 young black men in prison. That's a substantial chunk that can no longer vote. That's what Dr. King fought for. Voted.
Let me ask you one question. I'm not an artist, and I don't have any knowledge at all. But I believe, art is a form of communication, and therefore, one or the other is political, It's not about rape, it's not about exploitation, it's also a history of resistance. So how do you depict, is it possible to depict simultaneously, was 2 sides, I don't know.
2 sides of
both rape, domination.
I call it art was beautiful from the time it was made, but was never accepted until Picasso acknowledged a debt to African art. Now African art is collectible. We look at rock and roll. Rock and roll was once considered devil music. Bo Diddley, Little Richard, and Chuck Berry are still around, but Elvis Presley gets the credit for being king of rock and roll. Then we have reggae. Bob Marley was making reggae music for years. And not even in his native Jamaica was he recognized until Chris Blackwell came around. So here it is again, Aphrodite, beauty and culture emanating from Africa, is being presented by a black man, but never accepted until some European sanctions it. So you will see the figure of a black woman on a platter in the form of fruits, merchandise. And the only time it's valuable is when they see the economic value of it. Now African art is appreciating very much. Now everybody sees the economic value of it. But when it was simply art, nobody paid attention. So I try to show resistance. I have about nine pieces there, and I'd advise you to go across to the and see them. Here we have.
It's on the floor.
This piece was done just before. Oh yes, this about the time that thank you. Just about the time that Nelson Mandela was being released from prison. It's called Umkomto Wisizwe.
Yeah.
Toy Toy. If you remember, around the time that Nelson Mandela was released, the popular dance in South Africa was the Toy Toy dance. Now we see the white picket fence. In America, it's the American dream. In South Africa, it's the African nightmare. Apartheid. And I insist on calling it apartheid. I do have another painting where one sees a young lady, a school child being shot in the back. And as she's falling, her books are falling, and it turns into the face of Stephen Biko. I call it the twilight of apartheid. I don't call it apartheid. I call it apartheid. Because that's what it was, apart and hate.
What do I see? Piano keys.
What, huh?
Do I see piano keys, those black things?
No, this is the shadow from the picket fence.
Oh, okay. All right.
Because as I said, in America, the white picket fence symbolizes the American dream. But in South Africa, it was the African nightmare. separation. That's what the fence does.
Oh, I see.
So one sees the image of Nelson Mandela, young Nelson Mandela, smiling, and you see the people rejoicing. You see the flag of the ANC and the African national flag, and then it turns into the image of Nelson Mandela.
It's
Yeah.
fantastic.
And they're doing a dance, a toy dance.
What's the chain around these fingers?
And you notice it's not length, it's open.
Right.
End of
The chain is broken.
the chain is
The
broken.
chain is broken.
The same thing applies here. The chain is broken.
Oh.
I have another one that is the legend of Lead Belly. Lead Belly was frequently in prison, and I have the same chain broken.
And he wrote that song, Good Night,
Good night.
Yes.
In fact, that night I was just simply doing a painting of a guitarist, and you see a guitarist, but it's also just objects: a chair, a table, a vase, flowers, and a mirror reflecting two people dancing. But it turns into the image of a guitarist. I happened to have started that painting, and that evening I came up and I painted my basement, and I saw the movie about Lead Belly. And I was just so caught up with it, I was up until 3 o'clock. And from when the movie ended, I went down into the basement and I started changing up the painting to create the image of...
Haven't been to bed since.
No, I didn't sleep that night.
But now, was he in prison falsely?
What's that?
He was in prison falsely?
Several times. I think he was in prison about 3 times. In fact, one time he sang his way out of prison.
Yeah.
He sang his way out of prison by singing to the governor of Texas. And the doctor gave him, the governor gave him